let's prepare ourselves. If you put your hand over your eyes, I open my eyes to see the spiritual truth today. And now your ears. I open my ears to hear the spiritual truth today. And now just put your hand over your heart and extend out your arms. I open my heart to receive the spiritual truth today. The spiritual truth that I'm working with today is that we live in an unlimited universe. We live in an unlimited universe. That means there's plenty. There's plenty of everything. There are plenty of handsome, available men. There are plenty of handsome, beautiful, gorgeous, available women. There is plenty of love to go around. There are plenty of tickets to the 49ers game or the Raiders game or wherever you want to go. There's plenty of everything that we want. It's plentiful. And that's the easy stuff. You know, there are even plenty of jobs. Now, if you're a person who does not have a job right now and you're looking for a job, that might not feel true. But it is. There are plenty of everything, including jobs. You know, it may be, we Americans, we've gotten so that we want things more convenient. You know, it may be that you have to relocate for a job. It may be that you have to kind of switch careers for a job, but there are plenty of everything. You know who knows this is immigrants. There are many immigrants who come to this country with degrees in medicine, degrees in engineering, degrees in library science, degrees in education, and they come here and their degrees aren't recognized, and they end up being fry cooks or janitors somewhere. And those people who come here and that happens to them, they can do one of two things. They can become bitter or not bitter. Those who become bitter live limited lives. Those who become not bitter, who realize, I came here for a different reason than a job. I came here for freedom. I came here for safety. When they concentrate on that, what happens is that they are on the path to wealth. They are developing a consciousness that understands consciousness is cause. You know, folks who are on the path to wealth, and wealth right now, remember last week, if you were here, we said wealth means well-being, being well in every area of our life, including money. We're not a church that doesn't welcome wealth in money. Wealth means well-being in everything. We understand that when we have that path, when we're on that path to wealth, we have to develop a consciousness of receptivity, even in the face of lack. That's why Dr. Ken says we want to look at peace, even in the face of what happened in Paris. We have to begin to develop a consciousness of abundance in our life. Well, last week, you know, and here's the thing, developing a consciousness of abundance, a consciousness of wealth, takes work. Let me say it again. It takes work. Especially those of us like myself who came from families in which unlimited thinking and abundance wasn't really the norm. The norm was there's not enough. If you, like me, came from that kind of a family where the norm is there's just not enough, and so we either need to protect ourselves or hoard it or be worried about it all the time, then we really have work to do in developing a consciousness of abundance. And when I say work, I mean that. I mean not just thinking about it or coming here on Sunday and hearing me say, oh, we live in a... No, I mean working at it. Say with me, consciousness takes work.
Consciousness takes work.
Abundance consciousness takes work.
Abundance consciousness takes work.
See, we're doing that work. We started doing that work by the 7-step method in this book by a woman named May McCarthy, who wrote a book called A Path to Wealth. We started doing that work last week. And why May McCarthy? Because May McCarthy is one of us. She is a religious scientist. She comes from a church in Seattle. May McCarthy also started 6 successful businesses. The last business yielded $100 million in revenue a year. Now, somebody who starts a business that yields $100 million in revenue a year, I want to hear what they have to say. And especially if they're using spiritual principles and practices to be able to yield $100 million in annual sales a year. So what she says is this. Before you even get started on these 7 steps, you have to build your house on a foundation of rock, not on sand. You have to really get underneath and get ready to get these 7 steps started in your life. She says in order to do that, in order to develop your house on rock and not on sand, you have to have a relationship with what she calls the CSO, her chief spiritual advisor. Now, you could call that anything you want. You can call it a chief spiritual advisor. You can call it God. You can call it Elohim, the sacred grandmother tree, Allah. You can call it anything you want, including the name you see in the mirror. It doesn't matter what you call it. What does matter is that you develop a relationship with it. And to do that, you need to be able to have a meeting every morning. We talked about this last week. You need a meeting every single morning, and you need to speak briefly to your CSO every night. The first agenda item on your meeting with your CSO every morning is to read something uplifting. Now, the purpose of reading something uplifting is not to make you smarter. It's not even to make you work harder. It's to uplift your emotion, to get you into a place of receptivity, to open you up so that the good can begin to flow in. Let me read an example of this. You know, I talked last week about where to find these uplifting readings, and I talked about the Chicken Soul series. There's tons of Chicken Souls around, and they all have uplifting stories. And as we said last week, you can't worry about them being, good spiritual reading. It's not good spiritual reading. It's just good uplifting reading. It makes you happy when you read it. So let me read you one little quick story. Maybe. Isn't it amazing how few of us ask ourselves the important question? Several years ago, I was invited to hear an important speaker address a student body of a small college in South Carolina. The auditorium was filled with students excited about the opportunity to hear a person of her stature speak. After the governor gave the introduction, the speaker moved to the microphone, looked out at the audience from right to left, and began. I was born to a mother who was deaf and could not speak. I do not know who my father is or was. The first job I ever had was in a cotton field. The audience was spellbound. Nothing has to remain the way it is if it's not the way the person wants it to be, she continued. It isn't luck and it isn't circumstance, and it isn't being born a certain way that causes a person's future to become what it becomes. And she softly repeated, nothing has to remain the way it is if it's not the way the person wants it to be. All a person has to do, she added in a firm voice, to change a situation that brings unhappiness or dissatisfaction is to answer the question, how do I want this situation to become? Then the person must commit totally to personal actions that carry that from there. Then a beautiful smile shone across her face as she said, my name is A.Z. Taylor Morton. I stand before you today as Treasurer of the United States of America. Now you see, it took maybe a minute and a half to read that story. And that story is simply an uplifting story. It makes us happy. She could do it. Anybody could do it. She can do it. She did do it. That's the kind of message that we want to have. See, people feel good. People feel good. And when they feel good, they're attractive. Attractive people attract. Say that with me. Attractive people attract. Let's say it one more time. Attractive people attract. See, and we're speaking attractive metaphysically here. You could be ugly as a mud hen and still be attractive. I don't really know what a mud hen looks like, but I've heard that before. So, but here's what I want to say. Attractive people attract, and they attract wealth. And we know that intuitively, actually. We know that attractive people attract because we want to be around happy people. We want to be around them. We don't want to be around the Eeyores of life. Oh, life is hard. I guess I'll go eat worms. Nothing's right. You know, that's a call for our compassion, and we need to be compassionate. We don't want them at our parties. We don't want to go have coffee with them in our lives. Attractive people attract. So the first thing they do in the morning is to begin reading something uplifting so that it stimulates our emotions. It gets our emotions going. Ernest Holmes said it is the portal of life comes through the happy people. The portal of our good is ready for the happy people. He also said this. He said, if you want your prayers to work, you need two things. You need form and you need fire. The form is know what you want to say and say it. And the fire is the emotion. You need the emotion in order for your prayers to begin to work. And what we do is when we read that uplifting thing in the morning, it stokes the emotion. The second thing we do is write a letter to our CSO, our Chief Spiritual Advisor, describing what we're grateful that we have, what we're grateful for that we have. So you look around and you think of the people you love, and you name them in your letter. You name them in your letter. And you look at the people you like, and you name them in your letter. And then you begin to look around your environment. You look around in your mind's eye in your house. You know, I did that this week. I began to do this work this week, and I realized how much I take for granted in my environment that I am so grateful for when I notice it. You know, Don and I live in a house about as big as the center section of this church. And so I can look around the house, just sit down and look around the house and see almost everything I want to see. And one of the things that I noticed is about a year ago, we had a fireplace put in that is electric. And not only is it electric, but I don't have to go over to the fireplace. I have a remote control. And so I just have to sit down with my journal and just boop, hit that remote control, and the fire comes up. And it's beautiful in the morning, 6 in the morning, the fire's going, and the fall leaves are out, and it's just gorgeous. But I took it for granted until I began to do this work. I just knew it was there, and I began to do that with other things in my house. And then I went to my car and looked around my car, what's in my car. You know, about 2 years ago, I got a new car, and it has bun warmers in the car. It warms my seat in the morning. That's something to be grateful for in a cold morning. But unless you're focused on it, you can't see it. You don't know it. You have to be focused on these things. Around your workplace, look everywhere and begin to write down that which you're grateful for. Because here's what happens when we do that. We begin to have what's called a grateful orientation. Now, a grateful orientation is different than a person who says thank you for something. A grateful orientation is a person who says thank you, notices gratitude so much that they become oriented in that way. A grateful orientation is more than just saying thank you. Say the word grateful orientation with me. Okay, so here's what happens. When we have that, when we write that down for our letter of what we have that's good, then we begin to develop a grateful orientation. And people who approach life with a grateful orientation get more out of life. People who approach life with a grateful orientation get more out of life. Now, this church is often called a get church. That's not what I'm talking about. When a person with grateful orientation happens, you'll get what you really want. The things may come, but you'll get what the things represent. You'll get the freedom they represent. You'll get the love that they represent. You'll get the promise that they represent. That's what we get when we have life with a grateful orientation. But here's what else we get. Here's what scientists tell us that we also have. Scientists tell us that people with a grateful orientation in the physical, they have stronger immune systems, less bothered by aches and pains, lowered blood pressure, exercise more and take better care of their health, sleep longer and feel more refreshed upon waking. That's what a grateful orientation gets you physically. Here's what it gets you psychologically. Higher levels of positive emotions, more alert, alive, and awake, more joy and pleasure, more optimism and happiness. And here's what it gets you socially if you have a grateful orientation: more helpful, generous, and compassionate, more forgiving, more outgoing, feel less lonely, less isolated. That's what a grateful orientation gets you. Now, isn't that worth 3 or 4 or 5 minutes in the morning to have those things? Now, many of us have most of those things, but don't we want more of those things? Don't we want more of a positive outlook on life? Don't we want better health than we already have right now? So the first thing we do with our CSO is we read something uplifting. Then we get out our journal, and the first part of our letter to God is to be grateful for that which we have. Thank you, God, because this is what I'm grateful for. Then the second part of that same letter is being grateful for that which you do not have yet, but which you know you want. Being grateful for what you don't have yet, but which you know you don't have yet. So let me read to you one of the things that May McCarthy says in this book. For example, in one of my CSO meetings, I brought the concern for our company needed to reach a sales goal of $400,000 by the end of the month. Now, let me just stop you. This isn't the point of the letter, but it certainly hit me. Who has the moxie to ask for $400,000 by the end of a month? Who? Somebody with a consciousness of wealth. That's who. Somebody who, for me, $400 would be a stretch by the end of the month. No, $400,000 is nothing for her. So she goes ahead and asks for it. And this is what her letter says. Thank you for the harmonious relationship that our company has with all current and future companies. I am so grateful that the right customers are being drawn to us and that we can help them in superior ways. I appreciate the $400,000 in new business that we receive by the end of the month as a fair exchange of value. This is an example of giving both gratitude for what I already had and also what I wanted to happen. When I practice this form of gratitude, I receive definite directions or leads from the CSO about where to be and what actions to take. Perhaps I run into a customer at a trade show and share the benefits of our product. I know that the CSO will somehow create a path for my gratitude statements to become true. All you need to focus on in this step is expressing gratitude both for what you have and what you would already like to have. She goes on to say that during one of her CSO, just after a week she started the $400,000 letter, she began to get a flash of somebody's face coming in to her mind's eye. And so she said, I practiced what I learned. I followed that nudge. I didn't know what I was going to call this woman about. I just called her. And I said, I've been thinking about you for a while. She said to me, oh, I'm so glad you called. You saved me a phone call. I hear you have blah, blah, blah product. We want it. That day, she wrote an order for $400,000 worth of business to be used by the end of the month. See, this is what happens when you begin to seriously work it, not know about it. Don't buy this. Look, we have this book for sale, it's $20. I think it's a great buy. But don't buy it if you're just going to read it. Don't just read the book. You got to work the book. You got to work the book. And then when you do that, you begin to see some of the changes that we can work with. I did some work for some people a long time ago. And we started this Unexpected Income Club this last week for those of you who wanted to join the Unexpected Income Club, and I joined it, and I started doing the work there. I got a check for $4,000 that I had no idea was going to come. A total surprise to me. Now, I doubt I'm going to get a check for $4,000 every month, but I'm going to continue to look for unexpected income. It's powerful. I don't want to know how much, but just by a show of hands, those of you who decided to get into the Unexpected Income Club, just raise your hand if you got any unexpected income this week. Okay. So we can see that it's beginning to work. Keep at it. It will continue to yield for you. So now we're at step 3. So we've written a letter of gratitude for that which we want, which we don't have. Now we're at step 3, which is to read the letter you've just written aloud with emotion. Now, those of you here last week, we talked about Jesus and his example of saying thank you before he had anything. But I went back, and I have 7 Bibles on my bookshelf, and I read every single one of them, this passage for every single one of them. And every single one of them, now for those of you who weren't here last week and maybe aren't Christian, don't know the story is that Lazarus is dead, he's in a tomb, his sisters go to Jesus, they know about his resurrection ability, and so they come out, they go to him and say, can you resurrect Lazarus? And he says, sure. So he goes to the tomb, and what he says is, thank you. First he says, thank you. And then he says, Lazarus, come forth. But in the 6 of the 7 Bibles that I read this part in, it said, Jesus said, loudly, Lazarus, come forth. Now, Jesus didn't think God was hard of hearing or deaf. He knew that. What he was doing is he was demonstrating to us what May is teaching us here. Say it with emotion. You got to say it with emotion. You got to read your letter. Now, look, if you live with people, here's what I recommend. I recommend this. You go to a quiet place in your house. You know, Donna supports my goals in every way as I support hers in every way. But the truth is, I go out into the garage so that I can read it with emotion, that I can really read it loud. Why? Because I'm self-conscious. Not because anything she did. Because that's how we are, you and I. We're self-conscious about saying with emotion that which we want, which we don't have. And self-consciousness will not work with knowing. They're counterproductive. So don't even allow yourself to be self-conscious in any way. Just go outside. So by this time, you should be feeling really good. You've read something uplifting. You've read your stories. You've anchored it in your subconscious by reading it aloud with emotion. So the creative process is now in motion. You can't stop it. It's moving now. Well, you could stop it. We're not going to. Moving now. The creative process is on the way. So the next step in the meeting with the CSO is the part in which you imagine, you visualize that it's already come to pass. And you start to think, what does that feel like? What does that feel like? See, it's a powerful thing for us to visualize. And you know who does this really well? Sports figures do this really, really well. They understand the power of visualization. Let me read you just this. Jack Nicklaus, one of the greatest golfers in history, confirms the importance of visualization. I never hit a shot, not even in practice, without having a very sharp, in-focus picture of it in my head. First, I see the ball where I want it to finish, nice and white, sitting up on high on the bright green grass. See how vivid his visualization is? See how specific? He even sees the ball sitting up high on the bright green grass. Then the scene quickly changes and I see the ball going there, its path, trajectory, and shape, even its behavior on landing. Then there is a sort of fade out and the next scene shows me making the kind of swing that will turn the previous images into reality. Visualization is so important, and to get to the visualization part, we start asking ourselves questions about what it would feel like. Maybe your marriage is in trouble and you want a harmonious marriage. So what you do is you ask yourself the question, what would a harmonious, loving conversation look like? What would a getaway, where would we go on a getaway? Because, nobody wants to get away right now with each other. So when we're better, where would that getaway be? What would the dinner table look like? What would my life look like with this person if I was in a harmonious relationship with them? Or maybe what you want is your sales goals to improve. And so you say to yourself, how am I going to celebrate now that my sales goals have improved? You see, because you already have, is that what you want? Now that my sales goals have improved, how am I going to celebrate? What am I going to do? Who am I going to take with me? What am I going to wear? Maybe you've written a poem or a book, and the question to ask yourself is, when my literary agent asks me how much I want for an advance, what would I say? What's the number that I would say? That's the kind of visualization that we want to see you doing. Now, if you do your visualization for 5 minutes and you don't have a smile on your face, don't get up. Don't get up. You're not done. You just keep going until you can feel that change in yourself. See, May says that sometimes visualizing her goal in detail will give her the nudge of what she needs to do next. And she always does it. Maybe a face will come into your mind. You go there. Maybe it's just, I need to go over here, and you don't know why. But you go anyway. And when you get there, it'll become clear. So any nudges that happen, now next week I'm going to work more with this idea of the nudges, and I'm going to also go through some more the spiritual practices with the CSO. But I hope you'll continue working with this, because I believe that we can increase the finances of this whole church. I think we can increase the well-being and relationships of this whole church. I believe that we can increase the dreams of this church, this whole church in our life. But we have to do the work, the W-O-R-K work first. And I'm telling you, I don't love getting up in the morning and doing spiritual work. But here's the thing. If I can have stronger immune system, sleep longer and feel more relaxed upon waking, if I can feel more optimism and happiness, if I can feel more forgiving in my life, it's worth it. Let alone the fact that I believe that my goals of finance and other things are going to become a reality. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to keep working on this next week. Now, the week after that, we're bringing in a guest speaker who we're getting because he's in the area. And if you know people who are facing a health challenge, I want you to bring him to church on that Sunday, the 29th, because this is a man who's had stage 4 cancer twice, and now he's running marathons. And he's got quite a story to tell about how he uses spiritual principle. I'm going to rope off a place because I want our teens. He's a younger man, so I want our teens to hear him. So you want to get here and bring friends on that day. And then the day after that, then we're going to actually have May herself come, and she will tell us even more how to use these 7 steps in a way that's going to support us. So let's take this message into prayer, knowing that we are in the power and the presence of God, the power and the presence of the unlimited universe, the power and the presence of all. Because we live in nothing short of all. It's simply what we open our consciousness to. So this week, as we put new attention to opening our consciousness to peace, we put new consciousness to opening our attention to whatever it is we want more of. We know that the presence of God hears us, loves us, is the provider. I give thanks for that. I release this word into the law, and together we say, and so it is.